So far, working with these audio players in JavaScript, I started off with creating a background like this in Paint, just a bar with some brushed in speakers, and I used this for a background. The next thing I did was I created a background that just had a background gradient. I believe that's when I made the pink audio player, and it started off, the gradient was pink at the top, and then it graduated to a black at the bottom. And then I had two pictures that I used and placed with my CSS to represent the speakers. And let's see, did I do anything else? And I think right now, I thought, I keep looking at my own radio right in front of me. And I'm thinking, I'm just going to take my cell phone, take a snapshot of my radio, and use this radio as my background on the web page, and then just place this control right smack over top of it. So that gives you three different options. Create something in Paint, create something with a gradient background, or just take a picture of something and use that as your background. So I want to go over just the styles so that if you want to create something like this yourself, you can take a picture of your own radio, boombox, stereo, or whatever, and then just incorporate these elements right on top of it and use CSS to situate it. So this is how it looks in Firefox. And this picture does not expand, so if I open this up all the way, it's a static height and a static width. And there's a little imperfection here, and you'll see in between the different browsers. In Firefox, there's this little gap right here. But when I fill this gap to make it fit perfect, then Internet Explorer, of course, breaks. So this is Firefox. This is Chrome. Again, there's just such a small gap right here. And this is Internet Explorer. Fits perfect. So you see, if it fits perfect when Firefox and Chrome have a gap, then when I increase the width of this particular element, then it forces this off the page. So actually, since you've seen how it looks in all three, I don't need to keep running all of these. I'll just keep one open. And another thing, when I first started, I had these original icons. They were like in white and blue, and I thought the contrast wasn't really all that great. So then I graduated to these icons with white and black and red, and I liked those better. But for this particular control, I needed them smaller, so I wound up, and these were larger ping files, I wound up opening those in Paint and saving them as 14 by 14 GIFs, and then just giving them a different name. So I have mute tiny.gif, pause tiny.gif, play tiny.gif, and speaker tiny.gif based on this better looking icon set than these little tiny faded blue and white ones. They just weren't sharp enough. Okay, and then obviously the radio image right here. If you look at the dimensions of this picture that I took with my cell phone, the dimensions are 319 by 225. So when I went to make this, let me just start reading the styles, okay? And then I can show you what I'm talking about. For the body, that is pretty much the same. Background is pound 999, margin 0 pixels, auto and padding 0 pixels. It's giving us this gray background in the body. But this right here is what I wanted, why I brought up what the dimensions were of my actual image, because when you create the div with the idea of audio player, you need to use those exact dimensions. Okay, so if it's got a width of 319 and a height of 225, then you give that same width and height to your audio player. That way, if you want to use a border, like here we have border of thick black solid, this thick black solid fits perfectly around the image, and then you can work your div that's called controls down here. You can work that around how you want it to be placed over top of your image. Okay, back to the div with the idea of audio player. I told you why I gave it a width of 319 and a height of 225, because that was the actual dimensions of my photo here. And if you have a photo that has extra large pixels, you might want to open it in Paint and resize it so that it's the size that you want for your particular project. So here is how I pointed to it. Background, URL, images, / radio.jpg, no repeat. This is what it was originally. It was background URL images / skin1.ping, and the skin1.ping again was this thing that I made in Paint originally, this right here. And this actually had a dimension of 450 by 70 pixels. So when I was using this as the background, I had to have 450 by 70 set here so that it would match my image. I'm going to get that out of there. Now instead of me erasing this, well, I guess I don't really need it. But if I wanted to keep the if I wanted to possibly change to this, if I just misspell it, then basically it ignores that. So I can have it for future reference, or I can delete it, whichever, doesn't really matter. I guess it's stupid to keep stuff that you don't need. Pack ratting code. Hoarders of code. Okay, anyway, border radius is 4 pixels. Border thick black solid. So that's how you can create your own picture from your cell phone as your audio player instead of something in Paint. This right here is div idea of audio controls. Now that's this with the white border, so that all the buttons and input type range, and then this div that allows us to see the time that the MP3 is played next to the time that the MP3 will end. That's got a margin top of 69 pixels. I had to sit here and play with it, as if I put margin top 29 pixels, save it, and then refresh the page, you see that it sits way up here. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to try to set the bar right across the center as much as possible of my image of my radio. So I had to fiddle with it for a little bit, but the number that I came up with was margin top 69, and it forced that down right where I wanted it to be. Gave it a border of thick white solid, a float of left, and a width of 315 pixels. Very close to the width of the image, 319 pixels. The reason it's not 319 pixels here is because we have borders. We've got the black border around the image, and then we've got this white border right here to contend with. So I didn't want the white border to not be inside. So that was the controls. In the div with the idea of audio controls, greater than sign button, meaning all the buttons inside of the div with the idea of audio controls, we've got this set of styles. And I Z'd out this because at this point, this was in my folder called Part 4. This was the margin that he gave for his particular code. And I thought, well, if I do want to revert back to his code, I may not remember this margin, 30 pixels, 5 pixels, 0 pixels, and 0 pixels scenario. So I just Z'd it out. So this is definitely saving the code, hoarding the code, or whatever you want. It's just not being used since I misspelled it. It's not being read by the program, but it's here for a reminder. So this is the only thing that's actually running. Border 5 gray, 5 pixels gray outset, and you can see everything basically here, the button and the input and the div in the center and this button and this other input all have that 5 pixels gray outset. Height is 24 pixels and width is 24 pixels. The cursor's pointer, the outline is none, the display is black, and the float is left. So the only thing that's changed here is that I kept this in the code but just misspelled it. Div audio controls all of the input, and we have 2 of them. This input with a type of range and this input with a type of range. So for that, same thing, I Z'd out this margin, 30 pixels, 10 pixels, 0 pixels, 0 pixels for possible future reference. So the only thing that's actually working is outline none, display block, and float left. Okay, the button that has an ID of play pause button is this very first button right here. Background URL images / pause tiny.gif. No repeat, width 12 pixels, height 14 pixels. And that's this right here that toggles between the play button and the pause button. And I think that the icons that I created are a big improvement compared to these right here that were a light blue and with a white background. I think these just have much more contrast, so they look better. Alright, then I have the button that has the ID of mute button, which is this one. Background URL images / what in the heck is that spelling? Oh, speakertiny.gif. Speakertiny.gif, no repeat. Width 5 pixels, height 14 pixels. Which that doesn't look like a 5 by 14, but this was with his original code. I know it's got a height of 14, but it kind of doesn't. What if I put this width out of the heck of it? 14 by 14. Let me see if I break it. It didn't do anything at all for this, but let me run this in Internet Explorer and see if I just broke it. No, I just didn't break it, so 14 by 14 it is. The input with the ID seek slider, that's this input right here, has a width of 63 pixels, a background color of #222, and a border of 5 pixels gray inset. Then this input with the ID of volume slider has a width of 66 pixels, a background color of 222, and a border of 5 pixels gray inset. This here in the middle with the blue set of numbers is the div with the ID of time box. Again, I Z'd out this margin, 30 pixels, 10 pixels, 0 pixels, and 0 pixels, so that doesn't count. Only these styles are actually functioning styles. And that's got float left with 104 pixels, background #000, probably so that you have, these over here have a background of 222, which is almost black, but just a little tiny bit lighter. And 000 is definitely black. That's probably so that you have the best contrast possible for your numbers right here. Border 5 pixels gray inset, text align center, color #09F, font family Arial, Helvetica, sans serif, and finally font size is 12 pixels. Now this is the input type equals range. All these input type equals range styles have to do with various browsers. So all of this, none of this stuff right here has changed from previous videos, and I don't know why my highlight is acting stupid, but it is. So I'm not going to read all this. You can just pause it and then resume. I'm just going to highlight each chunk at a time. Actually, this has changed. I apologize. This has. because the code that I had before, I made these thumbs like wild colors and taller and fatter. And here you can see they're all smaller. They're all like little circles instead of eggs or footballs or ovals or whatever they were before. And I think this looks nice actually, to be honest. If you wanted to change the color of this, what you would change would be a gradient. Well, when we get to it, I'll show you. But I think it kind of looks good, just gray. It makes this look less busy, less childish, I guess. Okay, so go ahead and pause this and type it up if you need to. Now I'm going to move on. This right here. Oh, I'm sorry. This up here, WebKit. WebKit deals with Chrome and MS. These two. I think this is really driving me nuts. Why I can't highlight there. The MS deals with Internet Explorer, Microsoft Internet Explorer. So pause this, type it up, and then I'll move on. This Moz here, that deals with Mozilla Firefox, which I happen to have open right now, and you see that the background is lime. That's this line. You can change this line to any color you want. If I wanted to change this, golly, pain in the butt, to red, because there's red in this radio, then save it. See, now I've got red, and if that's too bright, then instead of red you can try maroon or some other type of red that you might find from some type of color scheme. See, that actually almost matches the color of the red in the center of the radio. I think I'll leave that. Okay, so type that up if you need to. It's for your Firefox, and then I'm going to move on. Okay, all of this. Crap. All of this. WebKit slider thumb. That's dealing with Chrome. So pause the video and type this up if you like how this looks and you want to use these styles, then pause it and type it. Okay, now I'm going to move on. This right here is again for Firefox. You can see that Moz right here, Mozilla Firefox. So this is styling Firefox's thumb. And again, we're looking at this particular example is in Firefox. So this is how I can show you the height and the width. If you change the height and the width, since this is dealing with the thumb, then this little thumb dial right here that's a little circle right now, you can change it into some really tall, strange looking thing, or you can change the color. So background radial gradient, the pound FFF and pound 333 are the gradients right now. If I were to take the FFF and change that to red, let's see what that looks like. Oh wow, that's weird. That's not what I expected. Now it seems like it made everything white, and maybe if there is a red, maybe it's so thin you can't see. So let me Control Z to get what I had back, FFF. And here, let's try red on this one and see what happens. See, that gives the inside dial the red color. But I think I'm going to go with what they had because I'm starting to get to too much craziness. And I want to keep this looking a little more neutral. Yeah, that just looks better, I think. But that's up to you. Alright, so if you're done with all of that, I'm going to move on. Okay. Alright, this is the very last style. Input type equals range, and here the MS thumb, this is dealing with Microsoft Internet Explorer. And pretty much for Firefox, Chrome, and Internet Explorer, you basically start off with this input type equals range thing, and then a couple colons, and then the MS or the Moz or the, what was the other one? Moz for Mozilla, WebKit for Chrome, Moz for Mozilla, Firefox, and MS for Internet Explorer. But go on ahead and copy this last bit if you want to. Now, of course, depending on the size of your image, you'll have to make changes to the code to adapt to the size of your own image. And then you'll have to make changes to these things, anything that has to do with the width of your image or the margin top, wherever you want this bar to slide. Like if maybe you want it all the way to the bottom, maybe you want it all the way to the top, maybe you want it like somewhere else, not exactly where I've got it. You have to play with those numbers until you get this control bar to go over top of the image exactly where you want it to be. Alright, that's the end of the style, and that's really all I wanted to go over. I just wanted to show yet another way to incorporate your audio player with an image. You don't have to make it in Paint. You can make it in Paint if you want to, or you can just use a photo from your cell phone, and you'll be good to go.